Good evening. Welcome to the Woodchuck Report on this very Vermont weather day of Friday, March 9th. Or I hope it's March 9th. I'm the host, V. Chase, and sorry for the unorganization. Got lots of things to talk about. Today we'll hopefully be getting phone calls, maybe been paying attention about things that's been going on in the legislature, both in state and national, and some international as well. So some of the things I want to cover today, well, let's start it off. First thing I want to start off with is the whole gun control debacle, as I like to call it. One of the things that came to me this week was the Harrington saliva test. The bill is H.237. Essentially, the bill, excuse me while I actually pull it up so I can get my information correct. So, the point of the bill, if it passes, it did pass the House by a vote, I believe, and it's supposed to go to the Senate. It will allow, let me say it exactly so I don't get it confused. So the saliva testing bill H.237, which if passed through the Senate and signed into law, which as I said already passed the House by a vote, will allow Vermont law enforcement to use saliva testing during traffic stops to determine if a driver has a detectable amount of drugs in their system. Obviously, we're talking about marijuana, although it could be used for other drugs as well. So that is one of the things, and some of the problems that are coming up with for the issues of this bill is that we know saliva testing is an unproven method. It has no federal standard. It has really no standards whatsoever, both state and federal. So we're essentially asking police to be a very subjective force, depending on what they think or what the person may be acting. Another thing is saliva testing technology is explicitly banned in other countries, which could go both for and against. The test determines the presence of a substance, not impairment. So, as we all know, especially with alcohol, some people can tolerate more alcohol in their systems than other people. I myself, obviously, several drinks in, it's going to be completely different than someone who, maybe mass is 200 plus pounds, physical shape, and so on, so on, so on. And the same concept will apply to marijuana. Another problem is the state's already ticketing and arresting drivers for driving under the influence of marijuana, which is including a middle school principal, which was stated in the article. Now, back in 2015, a report that was made to the legislature, researchers described saliva testing as a useful tool for producing investigative information and for confirming officers' suspicions about drug use immediately in the field. And by confirming officer suspicion, the author means that this would be a tool to confirm an officer's impression or bias, not objectively measure impairment. The text of Vermont's recently passed legislation law, Act 86, explicitly acknowledges existing racial prejudice in drug searches. One of the things that's been stated, both in state and out of state, is that African American drivers are 4 times more likely than white drivers to be searched by Vermont police, even though they're less likely to be found with illegal item. So that's one of the new law states. So this is a snippet. I could spend quite some time on this. So that's one of the things that the H.237 is going to allow police to essentially, if they think you're impaired, they can do saliva testing. If the saliva testing, which is unproven, says you are impaired, boom, there's your ticket. So to move on quickly from that, back to the whole gun control thing, I was told and heard that there was an attempted school shooting in Fairhaven. This was, I believe, last week or so, and Governor Scott has now decided to shift his position. Before he was against gun control, but due to recent both national and in-state events with gun shootings, he has decided that he will accept and probably sign into law any gun control measures. So there have been demonstrations both for and against it, both at the State House. And especially speaking about H237 as mentioned before, that would be one of the many things to look forward to. Now, to quickly shift, actually not really quickly, to shift from gun control, we'll come back to that later. I want to switch to the national theme and stick with something that, as a econ major, annoys me greatly, and that's to talk about tariffs. As you may or may not have heard, that President Trump has decided to put tariffs on both steel and aluminum, and I believe iron, anywhere from 10 to 25% of all imports. Now that's an amazing bad idea, because his reasoning was that, you know, foreign makers, specifically China, has been dumping their quality, low-cost iron into the American market, and that has been hurting the American steel workers, American iron workers, and aluminum workers. Which that is mostly true, only because we are a capitalistic system. That's how we work. You know, we take we want buy high, buy low, sell high. You go, you buy things that are at the lowest quality, you're at the lowest price for the highest quality you want. Now, the tariffs themselves are a terrible idea only because the cost of the tariffs are never absorbed by the actual producers. The producers are smart enough to shift that onto us, the consumers. So anything that's going to be using, aluminum, iron, and anything that's impacted by the tariffs, you're going to see those prices come up. So whether that's going to be, say, the aluminum in beer cans or any cans in general, or housings, since they tend to use steel, or anything automotive industry, especially since they are a large users of both aluminum and steel. So, and they have been one of the ones most vocal against this. Now, one of the problems with tariffs itself is, the big problem with tariffs is that it leads to a tariff war, which is nothing more than escalating tariff prices between two competing countries in this case. So, for example, we put a 10% tariff on all, aluminum iron imports. Well, the EU has already said that they're going to countervalue that with their own tariffs on American exports, for them, American imports, which then means, all right, so we put 10% on theirs, they put 15% on ours. Then we come back and retaliate to 20%, they come back and retaliate to 25%. And it starts escalating. And long story really short is, no one wins from a tariff war. Tariffs are a bad idea. There is a reason why we went from the 1900s to our current policy, because it hurts everybody. The only person who actually benefits from tariffs are the physical domestic producers, because it essentially helps eliminate or equalize their competition. If you're an American steel worker and your, say, Canadian competitor is selling cheaper products, a tariff makes their stuff as expensive as yours, which helps you. But in terms of us, the consumers, it helps no one. So that's one of the many things about that tariff. And he said he's going to allow negotiations with allies, which is my suspicion in the very get-go, is he was going to use this whole tariff arbitration to try to get a better deal, which won't work. One of the problems with his current tariffs as it's happening is that it is now starting to hinder the NAFTA. In case anyone's forgotten, that he said he was going to renegotiate NAFTA, in which they have been working on it for quite some time. And as with all trade agreements, it's a trade agreement. My personal take on NAFTA was that it benefited America far more than it benefited both Canada and Mexico, who are the other two participants in NAFTA. And my reasoning is because back then when NAFTA was negotiated, the American economy, America was in a stronger position. We were allowed to dictate more of our terms to both Mexico and Canada. Yes, there are some American workers who did not win out on this, but that's part of a trade agreement. Not everyone can lose. It's not, as the saying goes, Pareto optimum. Someone has to lose. But the thing is, more people won than lost. Now that he's decided to renegotiate NAFTA in present day, the problem is Mexico and Canada have risen up. We're no longer in the same strong economic position as we were back then. So now they essentially will and are showing to take less, to be frank, crap. And so it's one of the things that's been hindering the agreements. We want better favorable terms. They can say no, and they have the economic clout to say no. So it's going to be quite interesting in the next couple of years, because NAFTA, they're still arguing over the terms and trades. Now, to get off my little spiel of NAFTA, let's get back to the whole big gun control, because that is the biggest thing. Excuse me while I just pull it up here. I have this article for the school shooting in Fairhaven. So, the school shooting in Fairhaven that has now caused Governor Scott to now change his mind. Read the article about it. This is from the Valley News. So, an 18-year-old Vermont man accused of threatening to cause mass casualties at the high school he once attended in Fairhaven, Vermont, was ordered held without bail on Friday after appearing in court in Rutland. So, the case has prompted Governor Phil Scott, a Republican, to say he is now open to discussion about looking into gun safety law as part of a broader package of efforts to prevent violence. A quick snippet of that. Criminals don't care for laws. We all know this. It doesn't matter what type of law you're going to pass. A criminal, by definition, is going against it. So, I mean, I could use countless examples of, say, Chicago and St. Louis and Detroit and Washington, D.C. as, states with high gun control laws, but that is also needs a closer look, because those cities also tend to have a very disparaging difference between in poverty. They have high poverty in lots of areas. And as anyone who pays attention to crime statistics would know, areas with high levels of poverty and high levels of uneducation tends to produce high levels of crime. That's just a, Y equals MX plus B, boom, 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 check mark, check mark, check mark. So for me, one of the things, if you really wish to reduce gun violence, improve gun education, or just improve education as a whole, including both socioeconomic statuses. Now, to go on, the Vermont officials described the incident in Fairhaven, a town of under 3,000 along the New York border, in case you didn't know where Fairhaven was, as far from the southern of Lake Champlain as a near miss after discovering that Sawyer kept a diary entitled Diary of an Active Shooter that he had recently purchased, and that he had recently purchased a shotgun and ammunition. The alleged Sawyer of Poultney, Vermont, he pleaded not guilty to charges of both attempted aggravated murder and other offenses. Now, if he is convicted, he will be getting life imprisonment. And obviously his lawyer has declined to comment, which is probably a smart, wise thing to do. And now in the aftermath of the situation in both Florida that happened and the situation in Fairhaven, Governor Scott is now saying that now he's going to have conferences in Montpelier that, and I quote, "It was only by the grace of God and the courage of a young woman who spoke up that we averted a horrific outcome." Vermont officials said there is no indication when Sawyer might have carried on the attack in Fairhaven High School, and that they said that threats were unrelated to Wednesday's school shooting in Parkland, Florida, that killed 17. Now, as we all know, Vermont has an extremely long history of both gun ownership and a relatively small number of gun crimes. Last I checked, we now have overtaken New Hampshire as having the lowest gun crime, but that still doesn't mean we can't improve. Now, there are smart ways to improve, and there are amazingly bad ways to improve, and it seems like we're getting edge closer to the amazingly bad ways. Now, as the article goes on to say that Governor Scott felt that the current Vermont laws were adequate to prevent gun violence in the state's schools, on Friday he said he was thinking about his position. And why, I quote, "I fiercely and strongly support all constitutional rights, including the Second Amendment. The fact is, these tragedies have become all too frequent," as he said, end quote. Governor Scott has also said the existing system worked to prevent a tragedy in Fairhaven, but the state must do more to assure everything possible is being done to protect school children. Now, as a side note for that, he is correct in saying that there is more that could be done, but some of the ways we're going about it seems to be very knee-jerk reaction. All school shootings, all violences are horrific, and we should do everything we can to prevent this, but we should also do this smartly and to make sure we can do it in the most effective way without either stamping out or infringing on any of our constitutional rights. And that's not just including the Second Amendment, that's all 31 amendments. I'll continue reading on this. As the governor, he said, I quote, "I have a responsibility for the safety of our citizens, especially our kids, which means having an honest and open and fact-based discussion about access to guns by those who shouldn't have them," end quote. And he said he was committed to working with the legislative leaders to make policy changes to protect children and all Vermonters. And also the state police, Major Glenn Hall, the head of the state police criminal division, said Sawyer, who first came to his attention in Fairhaven police on Wednesday after they got a tip, said that he was making threats. And so police learned that Sawyer, who recently left a mental health treatment facility in Maine, had purchased a 12-gauge shotgun and ammunition. So that is the point of that was the article, some of the things that were said. And as for the gun control, the question is, what can we do? And what can we do and what has been done? We have many gun laws already in place. And for me, some of the things I think about is why do we not become more effective in the current laws we have now? Rather than continue to say Band-Aid, put more Band-Aids and more Band-Aids, add more laws and more laws, when we can't even, nor do we choose to enforce the ones we currently have. So, for example, let's work on the current ones we do have now, and then if those do seem ineffective, then we can think about adding more. But until then, let's work on the ones we have now. And as I said, back to criminals, a criminal by definition is someone who goes against the law. So they break the law regardless of their reason or their mentality, they do it anyways. Making more laws to stop criminals doesn't stop criminals. It just stops everyone else who obeys the laws. I can make arguments saying, well, illicit drugs are illegal. We still have illicit drug problems. We currently have an opioid problem. Opioids, at least the heavy stuff, hasn't been legal in quite some time. Yet we have a problem. You're not going to go to the store and get, heroin, although arguable, if you know someone. So the fact that we still have all these criminal problems with the current laws, and now we're going to add more laws, kind of is one of those open-ended questions of, well, how many laws do we need to have before we realize that the laws aren't working? Maybe we should try a better tactic. As the definition of insanity goes, doing the same things over again, expecting a different result. That's an extremely insane thing to do. And so somehow a bad thing happens, let's make more laws. Well, if the first laws didn't do anything, why would more laws do more things? Things like this remind me of, you see in the movies, especially in the alien movies, you see all the soldiers are shooting the giant alien. They empty an entire magazine and nothing happens. So rather than trying a different tactic, they just keep shooting more and more. And so I think this is one of those things is, well, we have one tactic and we're just going to keep going. We have a bunch of laws. Well, they weren't working. Well, how exactly do we know they're not working? The fact that Vermont is the lowest gun crime state kind of tells me that it's working very, very well. You don't walk outside downtown Burlington afraid to be getting shot. That's just not a thing. Well, for most of us, that's not a thing we think about. We're allowed to walk on the waterfront, go running and jogging. We're not scared of our lives because someone's going to come up with a gun and shoot us, even though we have a very lax but very strong gun laws. So, things to be thought about, things to be debated. Now, I was hoping for a call, but until then, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. So, I'm going to wrap that up for the night. Just for a quick recap, so we have the H.237, which is going to allow the Vermont PD to, if passed and signed into law, would allow Vermont Police Department to use saliva tests to determine marijuana impairments. We have the attempted school shooting in Fairhaven that now has caused Governor Scott to change his mind and to rethink his position on gun control. And then we have President Trump throwing out tariffs to essentially, spook people, our allies, into renegotiating current trade laws. So those are some of the things to talk about. There was a couple more, but I won't continue to bore your time. So with that, I said thank you for joining me. Tune in next month, second Friday, obviously, and well, I'll figure out something good, something a little more. Oh, I think we have something. Hello.
Hi, this is Archie Flower from New Haven.
Archie.
You suggested you'd like some callers?
Yep. You're on.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't get your show to load, so I haven't heard anything that you've already been talking about.
No, continue. Speak your mind.
Yeah, so I think it's on the minds of a lot of folks in Vermont right now, the whole gun issue and the violence issue and how they intertwine, and the whole debate nationally in general. And from a libertarian perspective, it's just very frustrating to hear people talk about the violation of innocent people's rights, and the violation not just of the Second Amendment or the 16th Article, but also due process, privacy. It's all of one piece, really. Human rights are really bound together, and if you violate one, you're really violating them all in some way. And just hearing that people don't care about due process, it's disheartening. And it's also a complete false dichotomy to say that we have to give up guns to stop violence, because obviously guns are just a tool, and the violence will continue without them if we don't solve the root problems.
Yes, I do agree that right now I do believe that there is a violence problem. I think we have a people problem, and that the guns right now are the symptoms that we're treating rather than looking at the root cause of this. So yes, guns is just a scapegoat right now. I'm sorry?
Right, exactly. They're the symptom.
Yes. So, well, thank you for sharing, Archie.
You're absolutely welcome. Good to meet you.
You too. You as well. All right, that was our one caller. So, as I was just giving the countdown, we'll probably just end it right here, and saying I will more than likely be talking about gun control for next month's show. So, if you do have any questions, please write them down, or you can email me. When you go back up, I can find my email. I'm not a very hard person to find, as I very rarely hide. I'm all over social media in various forums. And if there is something you'd like me to discuss, or have my opinion on, or just try to see if we can figure out what are the libertarian perspectives. Because one of the things that being on the social media side for the libertarians is that it's a big umbrella. I mean, just like they say, conservatives, not all conservatives are conservatives. You know, not all liberals are the liberals we think about. You know, and I think I know there's a lot of infighting amongst ourselves with the libertarians on, you know, what does it mean to be libertarian. So for next month, I would say if you have questions, please write them down, email me, or call in, as you can see. And so with that, I say you have a great day and enjoy this weather, because it's Vermont. It could be anything, anything, anytime, any day. All right, thank you.